The most famous daughter from Married with Children seemed like she had the perfect Hollywood life until a real-life diagnosis changed everything, and she kept acting anyway. But she wasn't the only cast member whose life took an unexpected turn. One cast member disappeared from Hollywood almost completely. One became famous all over again with a whole new generation. And one went through a real-life tragedy while the show was still on the air. For over a decade, Married with Children was one of the most controversial and popular sitcoms on television. But while millions of people remember the jokes and the insults, what happened to the cast after the show ended is a story very few people know. If you enjoy revisiting classic shows like this, consider subscribing to Backtrack Television, because we're going back into some of the biggest shows and the cast stories you probably never heard. We're starting with someone who joined the show after it was already a hit, and somehow turned that into one of the longest TV careers out of anyone in the cast. Ted McGinley played Jefferson Darcy, Marcy's second husband, a charming, smooth-talking con man who avoided work at all costs and preferred to let Marcy pay for everything. He joined the show later than the rest of the main cast, but he quickly became a regular part of the Bundy universe. But what's interesting about Ted McGinley is what happened across his entire career. Because if you watched television in the 80s and 90s, you probably saw him everywhere. He appeared on Happy Days, The Love Boat, Married with Children, and later Hope and Faith. He had a reputation in Hollywood for joining shows after they were already popular. There was even a long-running joke in the industry that he was the patron saint of jumping the shark because he would join shows in later seasons. But the truth is, that nickname actually hid something surprising. While other actors struggled to find work after big sitcoms ended, Ted McGinley just kept working, year after year, show after show. He may not have had the most dramatic story from the cast, but in a business where careers can disappear overnight, he built one of the most stable television careers out of anyone from Married with Children. But his story isn't the most surprising, because another Bundy cast member disappeared from Hollywood for years and then showed up somewhere no one expected. David Faustino played Bud Bundy, the sarcastic, fast-talking son who was always trying to get rich, get popular, or get a girlfriend, and almost always failing. Bud was one of the main comedic characters on the show, and for years, David Faustino was one of the most recognizable young actors on television. But when the show ended, his career slowed down a lot. And like a lot of child stars, he faced a difficult question. How do you stop being known as that one character everyone grew up watching? But here's the part most people don't know. You've probably seen David Faustino in something else and didn't even realize it. He actually appeared in Austin Powers, in a small role that became one of those moments where fans later said, "Wait, that was Bud Bundy?" And that wasn't the only unexpected turn. He also had a rap career in the 1990s under the name DeLil, which is probably the last thing you'd expect from Bud Bundy. Later, he found a new career in voice acting, including roles in animated series like The Legend of Korra. So while he never completely escaped Bud Bundy in the public's mind, he did something many child actors struggle to do. He reinvented himself and stayed in the industry, just in a different way. And while David Faustino was trying to reinvent his career, the actor who played Al Bundy was dealing with a completely different problem. He was almost too famous for his own character. Ed O'Neill didn't just play Al Bundy. For years, he was Al Bundy, one of the most iconic sitcom dads of all time. The shoe salesman who scored 4 touchdowns in a single game at Polk High. The founder of No Ma'am. He was one of the most recognizable faces on television for over a decade, and then the show ended. Imagine being one of the most famous faces on television for years, and then suddenly, the phone stops ringing. That's what happened to Ed O'Neill. He was so closely associated with Al Bundy that casting directors had a hard time seeing him as anyone else. For years, he took smaller roles and guest appearances, trying to break away from the character that made him famous. And it wasn't clear if he would ever land another role that big again. And then, years later, something unexpected happened. He was cast as Jay Pritchett on Modern Family. And suddenly, a whole new generation of viewers knew him not as Al Bundy, but as Jay. The show became a massive hit, won multiple awards, and Ed O'Neill pulled off one of the biggest comeback stories in television history. He didn't just have one iconic sitcom role, he had two, and very few actors ever managed to do that. But the most emotional story from this cast didn't happen during the show. It happened years later, and it involved the actress who played Kelly Bundy. We'll come back to her story in a minute because it's not what most people expect. Before that, there's another cast member whose life went in a completely different direction. Not in front of the camera, but behind it. Amanda Bearse played Marcy, the Bundys' neighbor and Al's constant rival. She was one of the main comedic foils on the show, and her character became a huge part of the Bundy universe. But what many viewers didn't realize is that Amanda Bearse wasn't just acting on the show, she was also directing episodes. And after the show ended, she made a major career shift. She gradually stepped away from acting and focused on directing television instead. She worked on shows like Reba, Mad TV, and many others, building a second career behind the camera. But her story is also important for another reason. In the early 1990s, while Married with Children was still on the air, Amanda Bearse publicly came out as a lesbian. At the time, that was very rare for a sitcom star who was currently on a major network show. It made her one of the early, openly gay actresses on mainstream television, which was a very different environment than Hollywood today. So while many fans remember her as Marcy from across the street, her impact on television went beyond just the character. She became a director and part of a larger change happening in the industry. And while her life changed behind the camera, another cast member was going through something much more personal while the show was still on the air. Katey Sagal played Peggy Bundy. The big hair, the attitude, the shopping, the constant arguments with Al. She became one of the most recognizable sitcom wives of the late 80s and early 90s. But during the later years of Married with Children, she went through a real-life tragedy when she experienced a stillbirth. It was something very personal that happened while she was still working on the show, and most viewers at the time had no idea. After the show ended, her career went in a completely different direction. She starred in Sons of Anarchy, a dramatic role that was the complete opposite of Peggy Bundy, and she won a Golden Globe for it. It was one of the most dramatic reinventions from anyone in the cast. And there's another detail that surprises a lot of people. She was also the voice of Leela on Futurama, which means she didn't just succeed in one genre of television, she succeeded in comedy, drama, and voice acting across completely different audiences. But even with all of that, the story of Kelly Bundy might be the most unexpected of them all. Christina Applegate was one of the biggest young stars on television during the run of Married with Children. Kelly Bundy was the popular, fashionable, not-so-bright older sister, and she became one of the most recognizable TV daughters of her era. Christina Applegate became a teen idol, hosted Saturday Night Live, and successfully transitioned into movies and new TV shows after the series ended. She appeared on Friends, starred in movies like Anchorman, and later starred in Dead to Me, which earned her critical acclaim and major awards. From the outside, it looked like she had successfully done what very few child stars ever managed to do: grow up and become an even more successful adult actor. But in 2008, her life changed when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She went through treatment and later became a survivor. And many people thought that would be the biggest challenge she would ever face. Years later, she revealed that she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And what makes her story so remarkable is that she continued acting, continued working, and continued appearing on screen even while dealing with a serious health condition. Which means the actress people once knew as the carefree Kelly Bundy ended up showing a level of strength that most people never see behind the scenes in Hollywood. When you look back at Kelly Bundy, the carefree teenager from one of the most outrageous sitcoms of its time, and then look at Christina Applegate's real-life journey, it's a contrast that no one could have predicted when the show first aired. Some of the cast found steady careers. Some reinvented themselves. Some went through personal struggles, and some became famous all over again years later. But the Bundy family isn't the only cast whose real-life story turned out to be very different from what we saw on TV. One of the biggest shows of the 90s had a behind-the-scenes story that was even more shocking than this one. But this wasn't the only cast whose story took a surprising turn. Some of the biggest shows of the 90s had behind-the-scenes moments that completely changed their legacy. And one of them is even more shocking than this. If you think this story was unexpected, wait until you see what happened next. Click the video on your screen now. And before you go, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Backtrack Television, and let us know in the comments which Married with Children cast member surprised you the most, and which show you want us to cover next.